Patton was in a car accident in Mannheim, Germany on December 12th. We're obviously going to get into more detail when we go to the accident site. But lingers in the hospital, starts to make a bit of a recovery, but eventually fails. The big thing that made the newspapers is that they gave him a sip of whiskey while he was lying in his hospital bed. And that made front pages all over the world. Finally, he succumbs to his injuries. He's got cracked vertebrae, and what eventually gets him is a brain hemorrhage, which is very common for people that are paralyzed. The decision is, the question now is where to bury him. Beatrice has flown over to be at his side for the 9 days while he's in the hospital in Heidelberg. There are different proposals. The country of France has invited him to be buried with Napoleon in Paris. The Patton family wants to ship him home to Boston, but it's really Jeffrey Keyes, who was under Patton in Sicily and was an old friend of his, that went to Beatrice in the hospital and makes a suggestion of having buried with his men here in Hamm, Luxembourg. And immediately Beatrice says, yes, of course, that's exactly the way George would want it. End of argument, no more decisions after that. So, for this day, was it December 21st? Yeah. His body is going to get shipped from Heidelberg, Germany. Honor guards are lining the railways the whole way. Civilians have come out, both in Germany and people from all over France and the rest of Europe are lining the railway line coming here. They have the ceremony back in that part of the cemetery. Patton is not originally buried in this spot. He's buried back in the cemetery. He said he wanted the common grave with the common soldier. The weather is terrible. It's raining. A single plane is circling overhead. General Walton Walker of the 20th Corps has tried to fly in for the funeral, but the weather's too bad for him to land, but his plane is circling above. He's given full honors in his burial. George Meeks is one of the pallbearers. He's crying through this entire ceremony. I don't have the transcript with me of what the chaplain said, but basically it was a warrior's farewell. The problem that occurs afterwards is that so many people are visiting Patton's grave that they're tearing up all the ground. And so the decision is finally made after about a year to put him in this spot. Now, I had told you guys about Jean Gordon, the niece that Patton had the affair with back in the 1930s. And when Beatrice put that Hawaiian curse on her in 1945, she wrote a suicide note before putting her head in the oven and turning on the gas and said, "I'm going to get to heaven first and be at George's side." Well, I can beat that claim. 1954, Beatrice goes horseback riding, and she falls off her horse, and she's dead. And people didn't know it was the horse fall that killed her, but she actually had a brain aneurysm that killed her, and they said she was dead before she hit the ground. This was something she knew about but hid from her family. Actually, you know what, I'm going to backtrack for 1 second. Upon Patton's death, as we all know, he's a very spiritual person. We know that he believed he had previous lives. Both of his daughters, Beatrice and Ruth Ellen, said that he visited them the night he died, back in the United States. I believe it was Beatrice said that he appeared at the foot of her bed and kind of gave her this nodding look that everything's going to be okay. And Ruth Ellen said she got a phone call, and it was her father, and it was very staticky, and he told her roughly the same thing. Of course, he obviously did not make a phone call. But I think that, by the way, you'll notice there's a train passing behind us. That's how they brought Patton into here. So, you know, the spirit of Patton was obviously alive and well when he passed away. He was actually in a plaster Paris body cast. They were actually preparing to move him back to the United States when he passed away, but I'll go into more of that when we get to the car accident scene. Anyways, Beatrice has passed away. The family wants to bury her here with George, but the military says, "We're sorry." I'm waiting for like a truck to run by too. The Army says, "We're sorry, but only military people can be buried here, not members of the family." So her children end up cremating her and burying her in the backyard of their house in Massachusetts. About 7 years later, the children get together. They dig up the urn, they bring it here without telling anybody, and they rub their mother's ashes into the ground so that George and his wife could be together in the final resting place. So that concludes this portion of the tour. Tomorrow we'll go to the car accident scene and talk about all that. There's one last thing I wanted to add, and I talk about this in my book. Patton's oldest daughter, Beatrice, marries John Waters. He's a POW, got captured in North Africa. And he's the subject of the raid into Germany to try to save him. After the war, you know, he gets released, goes back home, but Beatrice dies. Beatrice, the daughter, little B as they call her. So Beatrice, Patton's wife, after dealing with her husband's death, about 2 years later now has to deal with the death of her daughter. She goes to her house with Ruth Ellen, and they start cleaning everything up. And she finds liquor bottle after liquor bottle after liquor bottle. And I think that's a testament to the stress that she was under when her husband was a prisoner of war. She was a closet alcoholic. And so many times we read about the stress of soldiers in combat, and we forget about the families at home and the stress they're under. And I think that really kind of illustrated that.